All right, this is Nathaniel Cain doing a follow-up interview with Miss Brooks. Miss Brooks, thank you again for agreeing to meet again.
You're welcome.
Now, returning to the questions. When did you move to Greenhills?
In 1938, I believe it was. Of course, I wasn't quite 2 years old. I believe it was in the late summer, early fall.
And how old were you then?
I was 2, going on 2.
And was there a reason why your family wanted to move to Greenhills?
Remember, this was the depths of the Depression. So, of course, because it looked like a really good thing to do, housing and living conditions were difficult. I think they had been living with my grandmother, my father's mother, and this new project, government project, really afforded an opportunity for young people like my parents to have a place to live, a nice place.
Were there any particular amenities or features that attracted them the most to Greenhills, or was it just the opportunity to find clean living?
Well, it's hard for me to know exactly. You know, both of my parents are dead. Have been dead quite some time. But if you look at Greenhills, there was room in the place that we first were in. Now I'm looking at it as an adult. I mean, there were 2 bedrooms, kitchen, living room, utility room. There was play area right outside the back. There were sidewalks everywhere. All the utilities were underground. The streets were all in, all with curbs, places to park with garages. Even if they were not attached to the place that you were living in, they were right there. So this was a planned village that, in fact, you don't even see in today's environment always. Where you had school, you had a grocery, a supermarket, you had dentist and doctor office, you had drugstore, and you could walk everywhere. Even when we lived in an area in the B block, we still walked to school. And there was a comprehensive school, grades kindergarten through 12. So, yes, if I had been looking for a place to live today, I would choose a place like that. They were lucky.
What was their neighborhood like before they moved to Greenhills?
Well, you know what? I don't know. I think they were living at my grandmother's. I wouldn't swear to that, but I think so. And I'm pretty sure it was the case. And my grandmother had a house on what's the University of Cincinnati's campus right now. It was a family house and on Scioto Street. So I don't think it existed. I know the house doesn't exist anymore because the university bought the area, but that's where they lived. Now, that was not a bad place, but they are living with their mother-in-law, in my case of my mother, and with my father's mother, my grandmother.
Were there any features that Greenhills lacked? Like I heard one case in which there was like only one house that had a working phone.
Well, I think, getting a phone in those days was not easy. And as I remember it, this was later because, of course, I didn't know about at 2 o'clock when I was 2. But later, when we came back, and I must have been about 7 or 8. In that case, you had a party line. You did wait fairly long while until you could even get phone service, and that was. I'm not sure that was a Greenhills problem, but I suspect it was a problem in general in that time frame.
What activities in Greenhills did you participate in?
Oh, golly. Well, everything. The school, if you think about it, is the center of the whole village at that time. And, I mean, you played baseball, in this case, it was school's activities, you did all, or at least we did all of the school activities, band, all of those kinds of things. There was a library, a good library, part of the Cincinnati Public Library, and it happened to be housed in the school, and so it was used as part of the school. There was a swimming pool that families could, pay I don't know, $10 maybe for a whole family pass for the whole summer. Golly, we roamed free in Greenhills. We rode our bikes everywhere. We hiked at other places, and so you had a freedom that we don't have for our children today.
That's a shame.
Yeah, there were playgrounds in green space that says it's a planned village. So each sort of area had their own playground. It was right out the back door when we were first in Greenhills and Chalmers. When we went to A Block, if you talk to anybody from Greenhills, they all use the word A Block, B Block, C Block kind of stuff. In A Block, again, it was right out the back, so you could just go out and play. When we got to B Block, it was across the street in the center. We were on Burnham. It was a horseshoe circle, and it was in the center. And, in that case, it was across the street. So every place, lots of places, you didn't even have to go very far across the street or out the back door to go to a really well-planned playground with big swings and slide and sandbox. And I don't know what those things are called. It goes around. I don't know what's it called. And a teeter-totter, I think, yes. So they were big. They were very strong. This wasn't, this thing's going to break down kind of thing. They were expensive, really. In today's environment, I'm not sure you find them. And they were all over the village. So everybody had access to playgrounds and stuff like that. So it was really nice.
What were the religious services like?
Well, in the beginning, and of course, when I was 2, I don't remember those, but when we came back when I was 7, that case, we were having, I remember having, I may remember this from before we left Greenhills for a couple of years. In the community, what was called the community building, which school was there, and in the auditorium of the school, which also was a gymnasium, they had church services. So the Catholics had it at 9 o'clock or whatever, and the other Protestant religions, I think they combined. Maybe there were 2 different ones, and they would have 11. I'm just picking numbers because I don't remember. Later, they built, and I think it was the Presbyterians built a church. Then the Catholics First, it was a school where we had church in the basement, and then a Catholic church, a separate Catholic church. So, it all started out where everybody was in the community building. We even had movies in there.
What films did you see?
Oh, I can't remember. But it would be appropriate for kids. So, scary movies that kids like, Donald Duck and things like that. Nothing dangerous.
Like old-fashioned Walt Disney that were pretty.
Oh, yeah. Walt Disney, for sure. Golly, it's a shame my parents aren't still alive. Perhaps somebody else remembers, but I don't remember the various movies. But we did go to the movies there. And, of course, it was hard because, of course, the auditorium, the gymnasium, is flat. So, and, you have chairs, just regular folding chairs, and a movie projector right behind you, and had a screen that was pulled down, so it was part of the school stuff. And you went to see the movies.
What locations in Greenhills were most meaningful to you?
Well, to me, first of all, the swimming pool.
That's the most common one.
You spent your summer there. Then, I would guess the school. Also, the green belt around Greenhills, because we could play in those woods, and there was this whole belt, so you could play in those woods. The other thing is the fact that we had a police department. Also a fire department, but it was a volunteer fire department. But they had all of those things, all the stuff that you need for a fire department. But they would blow this whistle that said, people need to show up at a certain place. The whistle, the number of things it said, well, then the fire, or what they needed, fire people, needed to go to a certain area in Greenhills that tells them, that they go to work. I think my brother-in-law told me, I think they might still have at least some fire department volunteers. Not a total volunteer fire department, maybe, and there was police. Not a whole lot. I remember the so-called chief of police was Johnny Baldwin, who was the father of one of my classmates. So we were really safe in Greenhills. You really could roam free.
What was your experience like in the Greenhills schools?
It was very good. Even though after the war, maybe even not quite after the war, but close to the end of the war, I remember my third grade class, so there were lots of kids. My third grade class, I think, had 54 kids in it. That poor teacher having to manage 54 kids. They didn't really do very much like you see today. They didn't really do very much teacher's assistants, meaning, volunteer teacher's assistants. And so I don't remember very much of that. We really did get a good education. The thing I liked the best and probably got me to school was the band program, where we had to take these aptitude tests when you were about in the fourth grade. And Then you were invited, if they thought you had aptitude, you were invited into the music program and given an instrument and someone teaching you. So it was quite a thing. In fact, we had a very good band. Wasn't great, enormous, but they were good, and we had a wonderful band instructor. I mean, for heaven's sake, he got his PhD in musicology and played for the Cincinnati Symphony. So, when you have something like that, we had lots of good teachers, I think.
What was the name of the band?
Just the Greenhills High School Band.
Oh, so
we didn't have any. Yes, we were a marching band, but you have to go back a lot of years before all this stuff that you see today. Yeah, we had a marching band. In fact, Dr. Riley had been in the Air Force band during the war. So we were treated pretty strictly. Go to march like this and it's going to go like that, and no slouching around.
Did you have a favorite class?
Favorite. It's hard to say. I'm thinking high school. An interesting thing happened when we were in the 7th and 8th grade. They put the kids that were in band and the music, also did music program and those kinds of, there was 2 classes of 8th graders. So one class when the kids were in band because of the scheduling of stuff. Turned out that was an interesting thing that happened because that class also got enough together, and there were enough kids doing band and singing and stuff, that we put on in the 8th grade HMS Buttercup. The Gilbert and Sullivan opera, where we in fact made the costumes, kids made the costumes. The pianist that was the accompanist was one of our classmates. It really was a big hit. 8th graders doing, I was trying to think if there were 7th graders in it, but 8th graders doing that. So that was, sort of a highlight that we were able to do things like that.
Who were the people that you interacted the most with in high school? Any friends?
Oh, yeah. Well, but you're talking about, we all grew up together. I'm thinking of Nancy Flint and Nancy Baldwin and Dick Higgins and, golly, can't even think of all the kids. In addition, a group of us, and we were lucky to be able to do this. The Cincinnati Symphony, in those days, I don't think they do this anymore, in those days had Friday afternoon concerts. So if you have a series of concerts every week, you have, you're going to play whatever. You've chosen what's playing at the Cincinnati Symphony. And they would have that on Friday afternoon and on Saturday night. And so we persuaded school principal, I think whose last name is Young, that there were 3 or 4 of us, bought a season tickets, sitting up in the peanut gallery up on the 3rd level of Music Hall, which I think Music Hall is now removing that level. And we would go down for the Friday afternoon. We'd take the bus, the Ohio bus line bus, that would go from Greenhills down, and we got out of school because that thing started, I think, at 1 o'clock. We were lucky because we saw all kinds of people who are still famous to people who know music. So it was an interesting time. We were young. We were just in high school. And we had done that the whole time. So that was an interesting thing, plus the band program, plus normal stuff. I mean, I suspect that the math teacher, I think his name was Mr. Miller, I eventually graduated from college in mathematics with a major in mathematics, and I have a master's degree in mathematics too. Probably that was because, it seemed logical to me. He was a good teacher, and I just moved on, with all of that. There was you just got a good, rounded high school education.
Were there any groups of people who were most welcome to Greenhills and those who were not so warmly welcomed?
Not that I know of. Other people may have another view, but I don't remember anybody like that. Kids are kids. I mean, you have friends, but nothing that says, well, that group isn't, we're against that group. I don't remember any of that. To be honest, we were a fairly homogeneous population. Not only fairly, I suspect completely homogeneous. In the population, yes, there were different religions, but we were white, all white. You didn't have a lot of elderly people in the beginning because they all were these young people coming in to the village, young, in their 20s, 30s, maybe 40s, but, you cut down the number of people that are there that are in any other kind of age group. So it was a homogeneous population.
How well were the farm kids treated when they entered Greenhills?
Well, they would come in on the bus. We thought that was sort of neat to be able to do that. And when it would snow, of course, they would get off and we wouldn't. Sometimes we would also get off if the snow was bad enough because people couldn't get in to get to work. But we would go out and play. I remember, and I think their last name was Brecker, maybe. There was a farm not very far. You could really ride your bike. It wasn't really very far away. And go out and play at that farm, play in the silo, roam around that farm. If you look at it now, it seemed like it was a big deal then, that it was a big farm. Well, obviously it wasn't. I don't know how big it was, but it wasn't enormous. But you could do things, you could get out and play. So I don't see anything with the difference of the kids.
Were there any differences between what men and boys could do versus what women and girls could do, like socially interacting with each other?
That's hard to put that in today's context. You didn't, of course, again, this is how many years ago now? 80. You didn't see many women with jobs outside the home. You just didn't see it. Now, men couldn't get jobs either. And my mother was a nurse, but she had 2 small kids. And also getting back and forth to the hospitals in Cincinnati would have been a real problem because you either you didn't have a car or you really couldn't afford to do something like that. Women were working, of course, in the schools as teachers, women and men. Do I think there was any real Well, yeah, girls couldn't play boys basketball, which was true everywhere. Seems to me we didn't have coeducational baseball teams. The girls played softball and the boys played what we call hardball. Of course, you still had, but the classes were the same in high school. I don't think it was any different and wasn't as restrictive, probably, because they were young. These were young people. It probably wasn't as restrictive as you might see in other communities where you had an older, more settled population. Everybody was new.
What was the relationship like between Greenhills and Cincinnati?
You broke up.
What was the relationship between Greenhills and Cincinnati? Was there any animosity between the two?
I don't think so. Cincinnati was a place to go and, to the big department stores and to the music hall, and everybody had family somewhere else. Some of them had the whole family structure, or pretty much the whole family structure, brothers or sisters or something living in Greenhills also with families. Well, we were one. My mother's brother and his family, my two cousins. And so you did get away, because you had family outside, but you also probably had family there too, like we did. Cincinnati, it was it was a big deal. If you went downtown. So you take the bus in and go downtown. I don't recall any. I mean, there are people in Cincinnati because you have lots of conservative people who think that you shouldn't have housing for. It's no different than you find today. Especially with today's political environment, it's not appropriate for the government to be involved in housing, for example, in this instance. The fact that it put a bunch of people to work building the place, plus, gave people a place to live. I'm sure that there's, just like there is today, people who think that that's inappropriate.
How do you define the Greenhills residents politically? Were they New Deal progressives, or were they fairly conservative?
I think they were both. I remember, people the adults having, arguments. So I think they were both. I really think that it was a mixed environment. I even remember when Roosevelt died, and you had, just like you have idiots today who say, "Oh, wonderful, gee, let's clap." So I don't think the political environment is any different than it is today, and I think it was a mixture of people who were far more conservative as to people who bought in and were delighted with the New Deal.
Greenhills was considered a planned community. Did you?
Yep.
Yeah, you mentioned this. Do you think it worked out the way the planners intended?
Yeah, I do. It depends on what generation you want to talk about. Would they have foreseen 80 years? No. But for those years from the 30s through, I think my parents left in the 70s, through the 70s, I think it was doing exactly what it was supposed to. Now, people were able to buy their own homes after the war. I can't remember what year that was. but it was certainly before 75, which I think is when my parents left and retired. Probably in the early, well, it was because I graduated from college in 57. So, yeah, that probably was in the early 50s when we had the opportunity to buy our house. And there was a lot of fuss about that, but it didn't seem to change the village terribly in those years. After 75 and after my parents left, I really don't know anything about Greenhills because I haven't spent any time there.
Okay, how did World War II impact the population?
Oh, I mean, it hit it fairly hard. A lot, you know, a lot of people, a lot of men went off to war, and some of them didn't come back. My uncle, we were always worried about, you were always worried because they were gone and you didn't know. The other thing that we had rationing. So that was a big deal. You had to find the ration coupons to have, and then you would say, is there, even if you had the ration coupons, is there any, quote, sugar or things like that were really delicacies. If you wanted to make, have a special something for Christmas, for example, then you needed not only the ration coupons, but you needed there be a supply of it. So you line up, you send the kids, us, I was the oldest one, to go stand in line. Gasoline was rationed. Tires were rationed. We had victory gardens. There was a whole thing with victory gardens. So, yeah, we were impacted by the war.
How did a man returning to the Greenhills village after the war adapt to their peaceful surroundings? Were there any instances?
Well, now as a kid, you're talking to someone who was 8 years old, going on 9, when the war ended. So what happens is that all you know is, for example, my uncle. I mean, you did see him come back, thank heaven. I don't really know any difference. One of the things, at least for him, was that he was in the CBs, which are the construction things. So he got even more experience. Other ones also went off to get more education on the GI Bill. So everybody, at least from a kid's point of view, seems like everybody moved on and was ready to tackle the next thing that's happening.
Which would be the Cold War.
Yeah, the Cold War, and yes, we did, yeah. But tackling also the rebuilding. Here we came out of the war and the Depression. And now all of a sudden things are building, there are jobs. So, things are really booming, really. New houses are being built. All kinds of stuff is happening. And of course, we got out of rationing in the United States fairly quickly. That didn't happen overseas, but that did happen in the United States. And so I think people were optimistic and ready to move on. Whether there were problems with some of the returning soldiers, I'm sure there were. But not that I, as an 8-year-old, would have seen, probably.
Returning to the Cold War, was there any aura of fear or sense of political divisiveness? within that village?
I think there was more when I was getting into college, more political, and that was because of McCarthy. What the hell was his first name?
Joe?
Joe McCarthy, you're right. And the Army McCarthy hearings. And that did polarize a lot of people. But that was later. I was already in college. So it wasn't right after the war. It was almost 10 years later.
And when did you decide to leave Greenhills?
Me or my family, my parents?
Both.
Well, I left after I graduated. I went off to graduate school, and then I got married, and I never lived in Greenhills again. My parents stayed until about 75, and then they moved. Would that be about right? We talked about this the last time. I have to calculate. My father was born in 1909, and he retired at 65, so that would have been 74, right? Mm-hmm. So they left then. They left in 74, 75. And they also never came back. So it's hard, it's hard to say what, I wasn't there and they weren't there.
Do you have any personal keepsakes that you kept growing up in Greenhills?
I think we did, but I don't know where they are. All the moves I've taken, I may have some. I don't know where they are. They're in boxes. I've been cleaning out the attic here. In fact, I'm having more construction going on in this 300-year-old house. So I think I have some, but I don't know where they are. And I think my sister and one of my sisters or brother might have something, but we didn't keep much.
Are there things you miss growing up in Greenhills?
Did we miss it? I don't know what it would be. We thought it was pretty good. No, you know what? I mean, we didn't have a lot of money. We're people who didn't have a lot of money. So, I think we were lucky. We had lots of stuff that we could do. We were never bored.
Nope, it sounds like you never would. Oh.
and we didn't even get a television until 1952. And the only reason I remember that is because I remember the Republican National Convention that year. So, because it was on television.
Were there any downsides to growing up in Greenhills, like an isolation or the fact that town was limited from developing too far?
I don't think so. Because you could always go out of Greenhills, if you wanted, and we used to go out, this is probably 9th, 10th grade. You could, we would go to North College Hill or College Hill on the bus and go to the movies. Then all of a sudden, in 1950, you get another car, and in fact, my mother went back to work in 1950. So as a nurse. So I don't think we did. Other people may have, but I don't think we did.
All right, is there anything else you'd like to add to our interview that you felt we haven't been able to talk about?
Nothing that I can think of. It's interesting that you all are interested in this. That's the thing I find interesting. It's a shame that we should have, maybe they did ask people like my parents and the other parents, so people of that age, in the 70s to do this kind of interview and stuff, because they were the ones who really, yes, we involved ourselves in this, and it was not, I think it was a wonderful time for us. But, what about them? And it's a shame we don't. I mean, we're always saying we should have asked Mother and Daddy X, Y, or Z, and we probably should have been interviewing these people. Maybe somebody did, but I don't recall it. And it would be nice to compare my view at 82, almost 82, with what my parents thought. Could tell you about them going there and being there during the Depression.
All right. Thanks again for the second interview. I hope you have a lovely evening.
Thanks. Same to you.